Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. Today, we're incredibly lucky to be joined by the fantastic Jena Malone to talk all about her latest movie, Lorelei. And I wanted to dive straight in talking about working with Pablo Schreiber because I love that it sounds like the two of you were both very far into working on your characters and figuring out who they were at the time when you first started having conversations together. And I was interested in how that really helps you find a lot of space, not just for your character, but for a film like this, which really centralizes around the two of them so much and so beautifully, how that really helped your process overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a gift, I mean, good chemistry is very ephemeral, it's a hard thing to cultivate. It's a hard thing to cast for, But I think the sort of gift of it is that Pablo and I are very similar actors. He's very fearless and courageous and sort of infinitely has a wellspring of vulnerability, which I think exploring the masculine with those with that toolbox is can be very triumphant and rewarding, and it felt very inspiring to witness when we were sort of going toe to toe. And yeah, and I have a similar thing where it's not that I'm fearless, but rather it's fear. It doesn't stop me. It's sort of where I always feel like whenever there's fear that arises for me as an actor in a scene, it's a place that I want to push into and investigate, because that's sort of what it feels like, the lesson that's being asked to be taught or received, rather. So it was really fun and freeing. And he's, very respectful and has a beautiful language of consent and how to build intimacy. And I found it really easy. And because we obviously didn't have a lot of time, in rehearsal, and with kids and 21 days and absolutely no money to make the film, we didn't get to really, have go over the entire thing and have all of the time that we wanted. So it was nice to just sort of instantly trust his process, and that where he was going to go was going to be incredible. So that when I came into the film, I could also dive as deeply, and knowing that we were kind of in the same ocean together.
Yeah, and with the fact that you didn't have very much time together before filming, and so much of it was just about figuring out what that chemistry and dynamic was going to be. One of the scenes I wanted to ask you about is when the two of them first kind of lock eyes with each other, and then they go and they have a drink together, and they're having a conversation really for the first time in 15 years. Because I think that scene plays so beautifully because it captures the intense history between them and all the different layers of their dynamic and their relationship together. And there's a lot of ways in which the two characters feel very familiar with each other. And at the same time, there's kind of a little dance as they're trying to figure who the other one is at this point in their lives after not seeing each other for such an extended period of time. And
Mhm.
so I was very interested in how the two of you navigated a scene like that and really felt out all of the different directions that plays into.
I mean, that's just a good example of good writing. You know, you have a great scene, it sort of does the work for you in a lot of ways. If you can sort of trust it to feel awkward and strange, and keep trying different ways to let it be. I loved that scene. I was so happy when we finally got to film it, because it's a scene that we've all had, right? I mean, it's so deeply human, like the sort of catch up, the like, wow, it's been so long, and rediscovering that you're exactly the same person in a completely different set of circumstances, and what still thrives about you, and what sort of has died off. And it's just a very human rite of passage that I love when filmmakers get right. And I think she got it really right,
When you filmed that very first scene where she sees him for the first time and just locks eyes with him, and you've got that beautiful hand gesture, just like holding your hand up to your heart, did you always go into that scene knowing how you wanted to capture everything that was going through her at that moment, or was that a scene where you had an opportunity to play around with it a little bit?
Yeah, that opening scene, that was I don't know. I didn't have as a deeper like trajectory. I felt like even when I was in it, it made me nervous. Like there was something very hard to put my feet on the ground and like live in it. And I think it was. probably similar to how the character felt, and so I kept just kind of going with that. And yeah, that one was a harder one for me to sort of have a game plan around, because I think I had an understanding, and then I got on set and I was like, this feels like, yeah, I'm just going to go with the nerves that is sort of naturally emerging, which sort of makes your voice go higher and your step go here. And it makes you feel out of body. You don't quite know like where to stand or what to do with your hands. And I like that, because that's a harder one for me to fake, you know? Um, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the pitch of voice in a moment like that, but overall, there's a really interesting kind of cadence and way that you work with the text and have Dolores speak as a character. And so I just wanted to ask about how you tend to navigate figuring out what is the exact cadence and voice and tone of a character going to be when you're first even sitting down just with the scripts by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, each character sort of demands a different discipline. And like previously, basically I did Lorelei, and then I did Antebellum, and then I did Stardust. And obviously Antebellum was such a deep voice work, that I did a lot of work on trying to figure out exactly what it was. But I think with Lorelei, I had an instinct to just kind of lose myself a bit and see what emerged, which felt dangerous. So I remember even being in the middle of a scene and being like, oh, that's not it. I haven't found it yet, and being like, shit, I gotta like Jena, like keep going. You're almost there. And yeah, there was a softness, there was something languid to it, but excitable that I wanted. And I think I eventually, luckily, found it, but it was more like the first or second day of filming, actually, which was really funny. I'm usually more disciplined, but there was something that felt right about being a little bit looser, with defining her, fleshing her out fully until I was on the set, in the body of it, in the rhythm. And I also think that it speaks to the process of being a new mother. I hadn't been back to work for a while, for like, I mean, I had done a few little things, but it was like a week here, a couple days there, and doing something where it was more like a co-starring, you're working every day. I had less time to prep. I didn't have that perfect rhythm of like, okay, this is me time. This is when I'm going to be with my son. So I definitely think I had less disciplined preparation time on this, that I've gotten better at. But it's sweet to know that it can sort of work both ways. But yeah, I definitely remember being like, oh, when am I supposed to be like memorizing my lines? How does this work? Like I can't spend 6 days just lost in a script beforehand. So yeah, it was interesting.
And in working with Sabrina Doyle, who's the writer and director on this, it sounds like in the way that you described the experience a lot, that she was very open to a lot of the ideas that you brought character-wise and really letting you figure out a lot of her rhythms. And particularly when you have aspects like what you were just describing with figuring out some of those once you were on set, how does that change your experience in how you're able to shape a character, but also the spaces that you feel like you have the freedom to go, because if it doesn't work, you can try something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is the vessel of filmmaking, right? You're not doing a stage play. You're not building an entire house in one evening. It's a constant work in progress, and it's a constant art of revising something. So I think that that's just how it should work on sets. Is like if you have space to see this isn't working and to continue pushing it in a different direction. But it requires a lot of trust, which just because you make a great film doesn't mean that, you have filmmakers and actors that trust each other. Luckily on this one we did. So it felt easier to kind of slip in and out and maybe give more bold choices, in the sense of, is this too far? Is this too much? Whereas I think in less capable hands, maybe I wouldn't have pushed or given as many options or colors, because I wouldn't have felt like the director would know when it was too much.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was so intrinsically interesting in watching this character is that she is starting to question certain things about her life and where she wants it to be. And at the same time, she still has a really clear sense of her own self-identity. It's not about who am I, but it's about trying to change the external circumstances around her. And so I was interested for you in how that balanced out in the way that you wanted to approach her as a character.
I mean, there wasn't one aspect that I didn't identify with Dolores. I mean, even though she's not really either of my moms, her circumstances were 100% how I was raised, right above the poverty line. My mom worked, both of my moms worked different part-time cleaning jobs. And just, that sort of very like, it's like food stamps and this year no presents and this year found presents. And, and so all of those things felt very personal, real, and like I could smell them and knew the taste of them. And then, but in the more, in the mothership journey, I think there was also elements of just knowing the disaster of it, the disaster of being your worst self in front of your children and your best self and the sort of lessons that they demand. And so I don't know, I felt protective almost on every level of portraying Dolores, because I felt like there was so much there that needed to be done in a way that felt really human and not judgmental and not, well, she's a hero, well, she's a villain. I mean, she's all of it. I mean, every single element is hers, and it's similar for any parent, is that any human really, we contain multitudes.
It also sounds like one of the other spaces that you are really protective on every level as well is in working with the younger cast who are playing your kids in the film. And, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with not having very much time beforehand, that with them, again, it was just about getting to know each other and hanging out. And how does that then transition so seamlessly when you're filming scenes like a family singing karaoke together because you just have a natural rhythm to play off of with each other?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, maybe one day I won't be this person, but I'm extremely like mama bear protective of child actors, even before I became a mother. And I think it just became even exacerbated from being a mother. Yeah, I just feel like you have to be a good leader when you have kids on set. You have to, and not a leader that vocalizes instruction, but rather demonstrates it. And you have to show them how to be in that world because it's all new, the new language, like this camera, this technique, this thing, doing it again. And you have to just, demonstrate to them how to thrive in that environment, and how to sort of roll with the punches and how to feel safe and how to take, how to advocate for yourself as an actor, which I think also a lot of child actors don't know how to do yet. So I don't know. Yeah, I find it thrilling. If I could work with child actors for the rest of my life, I would be 100% happy because I like what they demand from a set.
With the family dynamic as well, I really love the fact that there's so many really almost minute day-to-day details threaded throughout the film, but each of them tell you so much about all of the characters individually. And, like for you, the individual relationships that she has with each of her children, and whether it's, oh, she made breakfast and she doesn't usually make breakfast and one of her kids is calling that out, or the way that they bring groceries in from the car. And when you're shaping a character, how do those tiny little minute everyday day by day moments actually really help in adding a lot of bigger details in how you view a character?
Well, as an audience, that's the stuff that makes you able to empathize with them, and I think that was a lot of the stuff that Sabrina brought to it with the script. I mean, all of that was there. And so you think, I think as an actor, you instantly pick up that you have to sort of investigate. You're like, oh, look at this little gift that she gave us here. And look at this little thing here. And then, oh, yes, it's all dire, but look, there's like something in the background that's vibrating. And so I think it's more rewarding to be able to calibrate a performance working with a script that gives you such sort of finite details of humanity, that then, just makes scenes run better. It's almost like the sort of like untalked, like not talked about, like gasoline, for a scene is just like, you have to be able to have those small awarenesses, those little acts of brevity that can kind of lift you and help you see it from a different perspective.
And the film itself has so many striking tones that come through it. You know, you've got moments of searing drama. There's, you know, this beautiful romanticism to the relationship playing out and all these different aspects that are coming through consistently. Do you find that that's something that you find helpful to be consciously thinking about? What is the overall tone of this movie? Or does it kind of go back to what you were describing earlier in working with Sabrina and just being able to try different things and trusting that she'll know what she needs to pull?
You know, it's a very strange alchemy. I've worked on films where I'm like, okay, I have to just give this exact thing because this is what I think the performance needs for this film. And then you go and watch it and you're like, that was not what the director had in mind at all. Like it was sort of like, how did we make the same film? So it really is a director's job. You know, I mean, I can give my most like, this is exactly the kind of performance I'm going to give you every single take. And still they pick an off take, or they cut a scene and, you know, they add this kind of music instead of this. It's really not, you know, crafting a performance is not an actor's job. It's a director's job. I mean, it's sort of the actor's job to bring the palette. It's just palette work. It's bringing as many colors and variation and, you know, colors that wouldn't have been mixed together, let them sit in the same, you know, palette together. And then it's sort of the director's job to fine tune that and, you know, bring that out.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you about a lot of the scenes throughout the film that almost take us out, you know, break the fourth wall a little bit and take us to a much more internal space with your character, because every single one of them explores such a different space of her emotional journey and trajectory throughout the film. And so I was interested in how you played around with a lot of the scenes like that throughout the film.
Um, yeah, I mean, Serena gave, you know, sort of because I think she had this idea that she wanted to sort of elevate this very traditional story of like an ex-con and a single mother living on poverty, whereas like more normally you're used to seeing that in a very, and you know, importantly, hard way, very realistic and gritty and intense and kind of, you know, like there's a lot of truth to that. But I think that the gift of Sabrina's story is that she wanted to tell the story of redemption. She wanted to elevate these characters out of their circumstances. And I think using that sort of magic realism of, you know, particularly Dolores, my character being such a dreamer, you know, and to be able to use different visual themes throughout the film of, you know, dream lives and metaphors and like just very subtle ways, it kind of helps you it helps build towards that redemption. I think that transcendence that the film is trying to offer.
Yeah, and a lot of that culminates in one of the scenes later in the film, where you had to do a lot of water work in a tank dressed as a mermaid,
Mhm.
and I heard that you also trained in synchronized swimming for this
Oh,
movie
yeah.
as well, which is a part of your character's past too. So when you were doing that training, synchronized swimming, were you thinking at all about what would her specific skill set and technique level be, given that this is something that she used to do all the time, but also something that she hasn't really had the time to give as much of herself to recently?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think initially I went into it being like, all right, I really want to craft like what that looks like and this. And then, you know, we barely actually had any time to develop that. I think I had like 3 lessons and then 2 swimming lessons, just like with a fin in a pool. And then I was only in the tank, the mermaid tank, like 3 times. And you're only in the tank really less than 2 minutes. So it's not like I didn't have a lot of experience. So I think really the the thing I just settled for is like, what can I just do that doesn't look crazy? Like, what is the muscle that I can develop? Because I felt like it was much harder than I expected. And so I couldn't be too idealistic of like, okay, this is exactly what I want it to look like. And I was like, okay, so these are the 3 things I've learned, you know, Sabrina, which one do you like? So it was much more like toddler time, really.
But that scene in the tank is so impressive when you actually step back and think about all of the different things that you're having to do and think about in that moment, because you've got the swimming and the movement and the motion. You've obviously got the breath work of, like you said, you're only really in the tank for a couple of minutes at a time. And then you're giving an entire visual performance in terms of body language and facial expressions. So how did you set about figuring out how you were going to approach that scene and how you navigated all of those different spaces into singular moments as you were shooting it?
I mean, the only gift is that we have video. You know, every time I went into the tank, I was like, you have to record it because I just have no idea what it looks like, you know. And so the first time it just looked crazy. I was like, what? I did, I'm thinking it looks like this. And so, but it's like so clunky and I look like I'm drowning. And it's like, oh my God. It was really hard. I think it might have been the hardest thing I ever did on that film, just physically, because it's like not only is it the breath work and the body work and trying to emote, but I'm strapped into this, you know, mermaid tail that basically you tie your legs together and put weights on your legs so that you don't float because it's salt water, right? Because there's fish and there's live plants in there, and so salt water, not only is it freezing, right? It's not heated. You can't see at all, like at all. And there's like fish and things, and and then you're like have like 40 pounds of weight on your leg, and you're trying to sort of stay and be graceful whilst having to navigate this very strange thing. And then what's even weirder is the tank itself is like 4 feet tall, just not that deep, but it's like, 25, 30 feet long. But you can only come up for breath in very specific places because it's right at the ceiling. So there's all these like metal beams right at the water level that if I sort of lost myself in the moment, was just like, oh, I need to come up for air. I literally, and I did it a few times, like just bonked my head on these like metal bars. So it felt very like technical, it was a little bit harder to like lose myself in the freedom of it, but I'm glad eventually like it did look really good. So there we go.
And then lastly, because you have talked about how you have an eye towards eventually directing yourself and you've worked on writing projects, I was interested in how you've already started to think about the type of style and the type of voice that you want to have as a director, because every single time you're on set, you're getting the opportunity to collaborate with different directors, look at how they're working. There's your scene partners that you're working with where you really get to think about everybody's different stylistic approach as well. And so I just wanted to ask about whether you've already started to think at all consciously or maybe subconsciously about the type of voice that you want to have as a director when you eventually do step behind the camera.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been given nothing but the gift of a deep encyclopedia Britannica of different filmmaking techniques and lessons and styles and tones. And I don't know, I have a stranger point of view where it's like I feel like every actor is a director, because if you're on the receiving end of direction, you're also in the space of, it's such a dance. It's like actors are directing themselves in a lot of ways and making choices about continuity and structure and wardrobe and what you give to another actor. It's sort of like subliminal directing, within acting, of like how to hold another actor whilst you are still, without getting too lost in what you're doing. So I don't know. I don't think directing is that far away from what actors already do or are demanded of. It's just sort of put into a different language. But yeah, I'm working on a script right now. I'm pretty excited.
Amazing. I can't wait till we eventually get to see all of that. And I thought this film was so beautiful. And there's so many moments in your performance that even after you finish watching the movie, just kind of keep playing over in your mind. So
Sweet.
thank you for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah,
I really
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
your thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it.